No one leaves Hillcrest.
The first thing Daniel remembered was the sound of the gates clanging shut behind him, a metallic echo that rolled through the empty yard and lodged deep in his chest. He tried to laugh it off, telling himself that the stories were just local superstition, but the cold air pressed against his lungs like it wanted him to stop breathing altogether. Hillcrest Asylum had been closed for 40 years, a crumbling relic on the outskirts of town, its walls blackened with mold and its windows shattered like jagged teeth. But when Daniel, a freelance journalist always hungry for strange stories, heard whispers about disappearances near the asylum, he knew he had to see it for himself. His girlfriend, Rachel, had begged him not to go, her voice cracking with fear as she told him the rumors. They said the asylum was not abandoned at all, that the shadows inside moved even when no one was there, that cries of patients still echoed through the hallways long after their bodies had been buried. Daniel kissed her cheek, promised to be safe, and drove out into the night, carrying only his camera, flashlight, and the restless need to prove himself. Inside, the silence was suffocating. His boots crunched against the broken tiles of the main hall, the smell of damp plaster and something older, something rotten, filling his nostrils. He turned on his recorder and spoke softly. Inside Hillcrest now, main lobby. The walls are collapsing, floor is covered in glass. Smells terrible. He stopped when he heard it, faint and muffled, a low hum of voices like a choir behind walls too thick to see through. He froze, every muscle tight. The asylum was supposed to be empty, and yet the air carried the vibration of voices that were not there. He turned the beam of his flashlight to the walls, to the staircases curling upward, to the doorways leading into yawning darkness. No one. Only dust, peeling paint, and shadows. He pushed deeper into the asylum, through the corridors where patient rooms lined up like coffins stacked on either side. The doors were either missing or hanging from rusted hinges, some marked with faint numbers, others scarred with deep scratches like someone had tried to claw their way out. He paused at one door that had been slammed so violently it had cracked down the middle. His hand trembled as he pushed it open, revealing a small cell with a rusted bed frame bolted to the floor, leather straps dangling like limp arms. The walls were covered in words scratched into plaster. "Help me, get them out, don't let her in." The last line had been carved so violently it had broken through to the brick beneath. Daniel lifted his camera, snapped a picture, and whispered into the recorder, "Patient room," words scratched into wall, looks like panic or obsession. Then he heard it again, the hum. Louder now, moving through the corridor like a tide. He swung his light back into the hall, but instead of empty space, he caught a flash of movement at the far end. A figure, pale and gaunt, slipping into the shadows. Daniel's heart hammered so hard it made his ribs ache. He wanted to call out, maybe convince himself it was just another trespasser, some thrill seeker exploring the asylum like him. But something in his gut twisted, warning him to stay silent. He followed slowly, his light brushing across the walls, catching broken gurneys, overturned wheelchairs, and the faint glimmer of something wet smeared across the floor. Blood. Thin streaks dragged along the tiles, leading him straight toward the figure. He hesitated, panic clawing at his throat, but curiosity dragged him forward. He reached the end of the corridor and pushed through the door. It led into a large room, what must have once been a recreation hall. The ceiling sagged with water damage, paint bubbling down in sheets, and the floor was littered with debris. At the center of the room stood a single wooden chair, upright and perfectly clean, as if someone had just placed it there. The humming stopped. Silence pressed down again, heavier than before, and Daniel's breathing seemed deafening in the stillness. He took a cautious step forward, lifting his camera, but the flash went off before he even pressed the button. The room lit up for half a second, and in that burst of light he saw them. Patients, dozens of them. Thin, hollow-eyed figures in hospital gowns, crowding the edges of the room, their heads tilted, their mouths open in silent screams. The flash died and the room was empty again. Daniel staggered back, his legs nearly buckling beneath him. "No, no, no," he muttered, fumbling with the camera trying to see if the image had been captured. But the screen was black, corrupted, as if the picture itself had been devoured. He forced himself to keep moving out of the recreation hall down another corridor. His pulse was erratic, his throat dry. He needed proof, but more than that, he needed to leave. Yet the asylum seemed alive, its hallways twisting and narrowing, leading him deeper instead of out. The signs on the walls, faded and cracked, pointed him toward the medical wing. Against every instinct screaming inside him, he followed, thinking maybe the exit would be beyond. The medical wing was colder, the air sharp with the stench of rust and rot. He passed through double doors that groaned open, revealing a long corridor lined with operating rooms. The doors had windows, most of them shattered, but one remained intact, its glass fogged as if from breath inside. He wiped it with his sleeve, his heart thundering, and froze. On the other side of the glass was an operating table, and on it lay a man, restrained by leather straps, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. His eyes snapped open, bloodshot and wide, and he began thrashing, his muffled screams filling the room even though the door had not been opened. Daniel stumbled back, tripping over debris, but when he looked again, the table was empty, the straps hanging loose. He backed away, whispering to himself, "It's not real, it's not real." But the hallway seemed to stretch, lengthening with every step, the exit further and further away. The lights above, dead and broken, flickered for just a moment, and he realized they were not bulbs but eyes, glowing faintly, watching him. He bolted, running down the hall, crashing through another set of doors, and found himself in what had once been the cafeteria. Tables overturned, trays scattered, mold creeping across every surface. But at one table far in the corner sat a woman. She wore a hospital gown, her hair tangled and gray, her skin paper-thin. She was eating, her hands tearing at something on the table. Daniel's stomach turned when he saw it was not food but flesh, raw and dripping, pulled from something he could not see in the dim light. She lifted her head, her mouth smeared with red, and smiled at him with teeth sharpened to points. "You're late," she whispered, her voice slicing into the silence like a knife. Daniel stumbled backward, bile rising in his throat, and turned to run. But the cafeteria doors slammed shut behind him with a force that shook the walls. The woman rose, her bones cracking as she moved, her limbs jerking unnaturally. She began walking toward him, each step leaving streaks of blood across the floor. Daniel fumbled with the recorder, shouting into it, "Something's here, someone's here, I'm not alone." His words choked as the lights flickered and died, leaving him in complete darkness. Only her voice remained, closer now, whispering, "No one survives a stay at Hillcrest." Daniel's flashlight flickered back to life just as her face hovered inches from his, her eyes pale and glassy, her breath cold against his cheek. He screamed and swung the flashlight wildly, the beam cutting through empty air. She was gone, but the sound of footsteps scuttled across the cafeteria floor, too many to belong to just her. Daniel ran, shoving tables aside, slipping on mold and broken glass, until he found a side door that burst open into another corridor. He staggered through, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his spine, and slammed the door behind him. The silence was worse than the noise. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to leave, but no matter which way he turned, the asylum dragged him deeper into its rotten heart. He found himself in the basement stairwell, the air colder, heavier, like the building's lungs were exhaling directly onto him. The stairs groaned as he descended, the flashlight beam bouncing across damp walls covered in black stains. At the bottom, the basement opened into a labyrinth of storage rooms and boiler chambers. The pipes rattled overhead as if something crawled through them, and Daniel's breath fogged in front of his face, though sweat clung to his skin. He turned into one room and froze. Rows of beds lined the walls, not hospital beds but cots, each occupied by a figure lying still under thin sheets. He whispered into the recorder, "Dozens of bodies here, maybe mannequins, maybe." He trailed off when the sheet closest to him shifted. Slowly, the figure beneath it sat up, the fabric falling from a hollow face with no eyes and no mouth, only skin stretched smooth where features should have been. Daniel stumbled back as more figures began to rise, the sheets sliding to the floor, their headless faces all turning toward him in unison. A low groan filled the room, not from mouths but from the walls themselves, vibrating through the concrete. He bolted, his boots hammering against the floor, the faceless things shuffling after him. He darted through a door, slammed it shut and leaned against it, gasping for breath. The door thudded as hands pounded on the other side, but then it stopped, and the silence was worse. He turned his flashlight around the room and realized where he was. The morgue. Stainless steel drawers lined the walls, their surfaces dull with rust. Some were slightly open, dark stains seeping from within. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself forward, needing to find another way out. A drawer creaked open on its own, the metal shriek echoing through the morgue. Daniel swung the light toward it, his heart in his throat. A pale hand slid out, fingers twitching, nails broken and bloody. Then another drawer rattled, and another until they all began sliding open, one after the other, corpses spilling out onto the floor, their eyes wide, their mouths frozen in screams. The bodies twitched, dragged themselves upright, bones cracking as they turned toward him. Daniel screamed, backing toward the far door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. The corpses crawled closer, their limbs bending wrong, their jaws stretching open too wide. He raised his flashlight and camera like a shield, whispering, "Stay away, stay away." But the light dimmed and the corpses stopped, all of them snapping their heads toward the corner of the room. Daniel followed their gaze and wished he hadn't. In the corner, a figure stood taller than the rest, its body wrapped in a decayed straitjacket, its head encased in a rusted iron mask with no eyes, only slits dripping with something dark. It didn't move at first, but the corpses bowed their heads toward it like servants awaiting command. Then it stepped forward, chains dragging behind it, and Daniel felt the weight of its presence crush the air from his lungs. He turned and threw himself against the door, pounding, clawing, until somehow it gave way and he tumbled into another corridor. He didn't stop running. His screams echoed down the halls, swallowed by the asylum itself. He burst into a stairwell that led upward, hope flaring inside him, but the stairs were broken halfway, the upper section dangling like a snapped bone. He shone his light upward and his blood froze. At the top of the stairs, Rachel stood. His Rachel. She wore her red jacket, her hair falling across her face, her lips trembling. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice thin and broken, "please help me." His chest tightened with relief and horror. She couldn't be here. She had begged him not to come, she was safe at home. But here she was, tears in her eyes, reaching for him. He shouted up to her, "Rachel, hold on, I'll get you down." He scrambled up the broken stairs, the concrete crumbling beneath his boots, but when he reached the midpoint, the light flickered and she was gone. Only the straitjacketed figure remained, looming where she had stood, its head tilting slowly as if mocking him. Daniel slipped, nearly falling, and scrambled back down, sobbing now, his mind unraveling. He ran into another hallway, and the asylum seemed to pulse around him, the walls swelling and contracting like a living organ. He stumbled into a large chamber with peeling paint and rotted chairs bolted to the floor. An old projector sat at the back, and as he entered, it whirred to life on its own. The screen lit up, showing grainy footage of the asylum decades ago. Patients strapped to chairs, their eyes wide with terror, while doctors in white coats inserted needles, drilled into skulls, carved into flesh. Daniel gagged, turning away, but the images filled the walls, the ceiling, the floor, until he was surrounded. He heard the screams of patients overlapping with the hum of voices, louder now, deafening, demanding. And in every flash of light, he saw himself among them, strapped to a chair, his mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes hollow and dead. The projector sputtered and died, plunging him into darkness again. Daniel's knees buckled, his camera slipping from his hands and shattering on the floor. He whispered, "Please, I just want to go home." The asylum answered with laughter. Not one voice, but hundreds, echoing through every wall, every vent, every pipe. The laughter rose until it was almost a scream, and the walls began to bleed, thick streams of red oozing from cracks, dripping onto the floor. Daniel stumbled through it, slipping, desperate for an exit. He pushed through another set of doors and found himself back in the main lobby where he had started. Relief washed over him as he saw the massive front doors, still chained shut but visible, real. He rushed toward them, clawing at the locks, but the chains tightened, pulling the doors closed even more. He screamed, pounding against them, his fists raw. Then he turned and the lobby was full. Every figure he had seen was there. The faceless patients, the woman from the cafeteria, the corpses from the morgue, all crowded into the room, surrounding him. At the center, the straight-jacketed figure towered, its iron mask dripping darkness onto the floor. The voices all spoke at once, a single word vibrating the air: stay. Daniel's flashlight flickered one final time, and in that brief burst of light, he saw his reflection in the shattered glass doors. But it wasn't him. It was the figure in the mask, towering, endless, eternal. The flashlight went dark, the recorder clicked off, and Hillcrest Asylum was silent once again.